This is one of the most fun fights on the card. We've got Jingliang, the Leech, right? And again, we got to celebrate the wins, own the losses, right? I haven't always had the best results betting on some of these fighters, right? I talked about Tai Tuivasa. I made the donation when he fought Cyril Gane. The Leech has been my guy. 10 units. That's what I meant to say. 10 units on the Leech, plus 150 against Muslim Salikov. He checked every box for me where I thought he was the more dangerous fighter. I thought he was the more durable fighter. I thought he was a bigger guy. I thought he was going to hit harder. I thought he had more wrestling upside. I thought he had more grappling upside. I was like, where does he lose this fight? And I think there were some competitive moments in round one, but ultimately you just saw the physicality difference, how powerful Leech was, and he was able to put him out of there. Older fighter, a guy that was a little bit past his sell-by date. I was so thrilled with the Leech in that spot, went out there and delivered for the kid. 10 units. I was driving from one place to another, so I could not watch the fight. And I got a call from somebody that was tailing my bets and said, bro, you can't believe this, bro. He just knocked him out. He just knocked him out. And I was like, I could not believe what I was hearing. I thought it was going to be a competitive fight. I thought eventually he might get him out of there, but to hear it had all been done, and I didn't even have to watch it, didn't even have to sweat the 10 units. Absolute golden memory, right? You look at this fight, he's got a tough assignment. You got a guy in Li Jingliang who is proven, UFC tested, been around the block, fought a lot of the best guys, and he's always accounted himself as a quality fighter, right? However, plus 300 in this spot coming in on Bet Online, minus 320 on Carlos Prates. Shout out to our friends at Fight Numbers for those odds. You're looking at a guy in Carlos Prates who is one of the new sensations in the UFC. People are really getting behind him. Why? Because he's fun and he's interesting. He goes out there and he chain smokes darts while he's getting the performance of the night. That's just a cool kind of guy, right? Whether you smoke darts or not, you could respect a guy who's a fighter by trade and just like doesn't give a shit that he smokes cigs and he goes out there and still fights for 3 hard rounds. And, that's impressive, right? Could that come back to bite him against the highest pace guys, against the best guys in the division? Absolutely could. And is it going to be an interesting test here against the Leech? Yes, definitely the biggest test in this UFC run. But let's talk about what has made Carlos Prates special and why people have an eye on this kid. First of all, guys, we talk about knockdown rates. 1 knockdown against Radke, 1 knockdown against Giles, 1 knockdown against Mitch Ramirez. He hasn't put together a full 3-round fight yet. So he got a 2nd-round finish against Ramirez where he was basically dropping him with calf kicks, hurting him, busting him up a little bit, and then he was able to finally put him away. Great spot there. Landed his shots. He's out there getting doubled up on significant strikes by Trevin Giles. People are starting to say, hey, this kid's not the real deal. This kid, he doesn't have it. He's a Contender Series bust. And Trevin Giles, meanwhile, is a seasoned guy. He's been around for a long time, fought Duplessis, fought all these guys, right? And you saw what happened when he did connect. When he did connect with the power, everything changed, and he was able to put Trevin Giles away. Big-time knockout. That last fight against Charles Radke is the one that, idea bulbs start popping up above your head. You're like, wow, just how good could this guy be? Because a lot of fighters – everybody's got some tools, right? They're in the UFC. They've got to have something, dangerous about them that they can put together or, some way to win these fights. But the thing about Prates is, number one, he's shown a diversity to his finishes. He can drop you with the hands, the elbows, the knees, all these different attacks. But also he's pretty dangerous off his back. He's well-rounded. He's got an ability to wrestle a little bit. He's got an ability to go out there and push his own takedowns when he needs to. But most of the time he wants to be flowing. He wants to be striking, measuring. And when he finds you, he lands these huge shots. He devastates you, and he closes the show more often than not. And what I thought was so sensational is the way he selected his shots against Radke. He basically starts getting him to engage up top, right? I have my hands here. You put your hands here. Right? You start playing with my hands. I start playing with your hands. You are distracted. You're thinking about what's happening up here. And then he just lines up a massive knee and he uses the leverage of being tall. A lot of guys go out there and they have all these attributes, right? They're long, they're tall, they're clashing themselves into the clinch. They are getting too close to their opponent. They're getting flat back. They're giving up all their advantages of being tall. This guy is out there making guys measure hands with him. And then he's knee to the body, fight ender. Absolute closing of the show. That's a difficult guy to deal with, right? He's shown now a variety of different ways that he could hurt you. He could be behind on the strike count, put you down. So he's a dangerous striker, no doubt about it. And like I said, a ground game that people haven't seen too much of, but it could be a little bit underrated coming in here because he's got a couple losses, I believe, on the mat. Let's pull up the Tapology for Carlos Prates. What do we got? Carlos Prates. He's 19-6 as a professional, guys, and he's lost 3 times via submission, twice via knockout. So he has been, finished a number of times, right? We got to be very cognizant of that fact. That's always a live possibility again. But the last time he was finished was all the way back in 2017. He got knocked out in the first round by a Mikhail Romanchuk, and Mikhail Romanchuk is 8-3 as a professional over in Russia, and looks like he is juiced to the absolute tits. You guys can go look at his Tapology picture and see what you think, but that's what it looks like to me. So I think of a guy like Prates as a dangerous guy, a guy that has skills in all positions, but he's definitely still got a lot to prove in the UFC in terms of the higher level of competition. I think Ratke, Giles, and Mitch Ramirez are all probably guys that will not be with the UFC, this time next year, with all due respect. So if that's the case, then, the Leech is a guy that's had longevity, right? 11-6 in the UFC. He's been around a very long time, and he's seeking a big win here. He's coming off a split decision loss against Daniel Rodriguez. That was very controversial. Then he was supposed to fight, Michael Chiesa, and he was forced to pull out of that fight due to a spine injury. So when you're talking about going in there to fight Prates and you've got a spine injury, I'm already going to be very skeptical. I'm going to be very worried about you because you don't want to have any ailments, issues, problems against a guy this dangerous that hits this hard, that's trying to kill you from the jump, right? There's some guys like Michael Chiesa who are going to go out there and try and choke you, right? They might just try and put you in a little submission hold, right? This guy is going to try and hurt you. He's going to try and hit you with big shots, damage your body, damage your head, damage your face, damage your ribs. Like, he's going to try and damage you permanently. So if you've got any injuries, you want to be very careful engaging with a guy like this. Fighting close with D-Rod, I didn't think was a great look, right? We saw Ian Gary go out there and just handle D-Rod accordingly, right? He was like, hey, look this way, and then head kicked him sideways. Meanwhile, the Leech went out there and just had a very competitive boxing match with him. It was on short notice. I thought the Leech deserved to win it, but, he fought him very close and, ultimately could have went out there and tried to push the finish a little bit more and didn't do that. So cost him. Then you look at the Muslim Salikov fight. I've already mentioned 10 units on the Leech, 10 units. I said, this is a buy low spot because he lost to Khamzat Chimaev. And I was like, unfortunately, Muslim Salikov, you, sir, are no Khamzat Chimaev. So I was big on the Leech there. Only time I've ever bet on or against him on the money line. Proud of that result. Meanwhile, for Carlos Prates, I bet him against Mitch Ramirez via submission. So that's all I wanted to mention here in terms of the previous results. I only bet a quarter unit on that, even less, just a small 0.2 unit shot on the Carlos Prates via submission prop against Mitch Ramirez. And I think he could have probably finished that one any way he wanted by the end of things. But again, when you look at him, deceptive 3-3 record, career to the submission. He is quality. He does know what he's doing off of his back, fighting nerds. You know that these guys come out of that camp ready to deal on the ground. They've got a lot of power in their hands. They're not afraid to show that, but they also have that ability to work on the mat. So I think that he's a great fighter. I think he's quality. I think he's fun. I think he's got a lot to offer, but he's also got to be careful and protect that chin because the Leech has a ton of power. I mean, it's proven, guys, 8 knockouts in the UFC. That's just nothing to sneeze at, period, point blank. Doesn't matter who you are. Carlos Prates has been knocked out twice. He's been knocked out in the first round. Ask Santiago Ponzinibbio. He thought, it's cute. We'll go out there and have a little glove touch, see what time it is. And the Leech said, hey, man, you've been out for a little while, hold this, and just got after him. So the Leech can be very dangerous. He can be very assertive. He'll cheat his ass off, right? If you go out there and try and guillotine this man, 2 thumbs in the eyes like you're Jake Matthews, try and pull them things out like he's got spoons for fingers. He's one of the dirtiest fighters I've ever seen in that regard. But when you have to think about it, like, the Leech is fun. He had the cool suit gimmick. He's been out there, but he's a guy that is definitely starting to age up a little bit in his career, right? And he's having these injuries. He's having these fight cancellations. Those are all things that are a little bit worrying. He's taking on a guy who's got a 6-inch reach advantage here in Carlos Prates, a 1-inch height advantage, and he's going to be 5 years his junior. So a lot of things that are kind of working against the Leech right now, but we know that the Leech is tough. We know that he's credible. We know that he's dangerous. So anybody who's counting out the Leech, I think, would be crazy, right? The Leech, if I could pull up his prop lines real quick. The Leech via knockout, I think, is the way I would look to play it if I was on the Leech side, which is about plus 500. So, I mean, at that point, maybe you just take the money line in case it's a decision. But yeah, I think that the Leech is probably a live underdog this week. But ultimately, I'm going to be very careful about who I bet as a dog. The pay-per-views, a lot of favorites have come through at the pay-per-views this year. So I want to be very careful and selective with my dog shots. And the one thing I worry about the Leech in this spot is, like I said, the injuries, guys. In any kind of subpar performance here against Carlos Prates, I think things could go very sideways. So I think the Leech at his best, winnable fight for him. But at 36 years of age, coming off of, a major injury, I think that that's something you really want to watch out for in this main card opener as a potential red flag.